Hello students, Mr. Sims here. We are in Module 3. This is under our Day 4 lesson. This is page 11 clearly. And we're on example number 3. So we spent some time with combining some like terms, one skill, and then the last lesson we spent time just distributing, using the distributed property. So simplifying expressions. Okay, so we've been using that word a little bit here and there. It basically means you just keep doing math until you can't do it anymore. So here are two examples of a couple of algebra expressions that look sloppy, that look like there's a lot going on. Simplifying it basically just means cleaning it up. So we're going to write the following expressions in standard form, okay, and we'll talk more about that in a moment, by distributing and combining like terms. So now we're essentially going to put the two things together. So the question is always going to be, well, what comes first? Do you distribute first? Do we combine like terms? Well, it all comes down to our orders of operations. So if you think our orders of operations, PEMDAS, distributing falls under the multiplication and division piece because distributing is multiplying. Right? A little bit later on, we'll do some undistributing, and that would be dividing, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then combining is adding and subtracting. So remember, if the signs are the same, you add, keep the sign. Signs are different. Okay, those rules of integers that come into play. All right, so our first one, you see, I got one that's all positives because that way we don't have to worry about our signs that much. But we're going to go through, and the first step is to distribute. Now, what gets distributed? Well, in this particular case, what gets distributed is the number that's out in front of the parentheses gets distributed to what's inside the parentheses. So in that first part, the 2 gets distributed to the x and the 5. So we have 2 x's, which would be 2x, and we have 2 5's, which would be 10. For this one, it's a 4. Okay, notice I circled the positive. Okay, that's going to come into play a little bit later on. Not so much in this lesson, but when we start dealing with negatives in front. So we have 4 2x's, which would be 8x, and we have 4 6's, which would be 24. Right? Now, my suggestion has been, instead of doing this horizontally, take these terms and line them up underneath. So I'm going to put the 8x underneath the 2x. I'm going to put the 24 underneath the 10, and we'll combine our like terms. So 2x and 8x would be 10x, and then 10 and 24 would be 34. Okay? Standard form is where you put the variables first. Okay, and then this constant term or this number goes on at the end. Nothing else we can do with that. We can't combine these because this has an x and this doesn't. So that's done. That's simplified. All right, the second one we have here is a little bit more complicated because of the negatives that are involved. So as we go, we got 5 times 4m. 5 4m's would be 20m. And then 5 negative 2's, which would be negative 10n. So we got 20m minus 10n. Okay. Here, positive 6 times a negative 3m. A positive times a negative is a negative. Okay. Some of you guys are writing this plus minus thing in there. You're writing a positive sign, then a negative sign. That's not necessary. It's not wrong, but it's not necessary. All right, then I'm going to take the positive 6 times the negative 5n. So I have 6 negative 5n's, which would be negative 30n. Okay. And then I'm going to line up my like terms. Okay. So I'm going to take my 18, my negative 18m underneath the 20m. And I'm going to take my negative 30n, put it underneath the 10n. Now when I combine vertically, 20 minus 18 is 2m. Negative 10 minus 30, negative 40n. Okay, remember what happens when you combine two negative numbers. It just becomes more negative. And this is done. And no, you can't put these together either because this is an m and that's an n. They are not the same letter. All right, so this is a conclusion. It was kind of a short one, only 2 examples to do, but these problems do take a little bit of time. All right, for our checkpoint, exercise 2. Okay. So you check through, do the examples. This is a tough one. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see how many of you can get this one. And then from there we go right to the fluency. So after here, Make sure you check check your answers, and then you move on to the fluency on the next couple of pages. All right, so for recorded lessons, this is Mr. Sims signing off.